My name is Rachel, and I'm 42 years old. When I discovered my daughter Emma's seizure medication carefully hidden beneath my sister Claire's makeup compact, I knew my family would never be the same. What I didn't expect was that confronting her would lead to police officers showing up at her doorstep 3 days later. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, please hit like and subscribe to hear how a simple family dinner revealed a truth that changed everything we thought we knew about trust. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Life as a single mother to a child with epilepsy has taught me to be vigilant about everything. Emma is 17 now, but she was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy when she was just 12 years old. Those first few months after her diagnosis were absolutely terrifying. I remember the sleepless nights when I would check on her every hour, afraid that she might have a seizure while sleeping. The neurologist, Dr. Martinez, explained that with the right medication and monitoring, Emma could live a completely normal life. The key word being medication. Emma takes Lamictal twice daily, a mood stabilizer that also prevents her seizures. Missing even one dose can trigger breakthrough seizures, and missing multiple doses can lead to status epilepticus, a life-threatening condition where seizures don't stop on their own. Dr. Martinez made this crystal clear during our very first appointment. He looked me directly in the eyes and said that consistency with medication was not negotiable. It was literally a matter of life and death. We live in a cozy 3-bedroom house in Riverside, California, just Emma and me. After my divorce from her father when she was 10, we've built our own little world together. I work as a dental hygienist at a practice downtown, and the schedule is flexible enough that I can always be home when Emma gets back from school. The pay isn't extraordinary, but it's steady and comes with excellent health insurance, which has been crucial given Emma's medical needs. Emma is an incredible kid. Despite her condition, she maintains a 3.8 GPA at Roosevelt High School, volunteers at the local animal shelter every weekend, and has never once complained about having to take medication twice a day. She's responsible about her pills, setting phone alarms, and keeping a pill organizer that she refills every Sunday evening. We've turned her medication routine into something positive, a moment where we check in with each other about our day. My sister Claire, on the other hand, lives a very different life. At 38, she's 4 years younger than me, but has always acted like the world owes her something. After a brief marriage to a pharmaceutical sales representative that ended badly, she's been struggling financially for the past 3 years. She works sporadically as a substitute teacher, but her income is unpredictable at best. Claire has always had what I can only describe as an entitled attitude, expecting family members to bail her out of financial difficulties without taking any real responsibility for her choices. Claire has 2 children from her marriage, Tyler, who's 15, and Madison, who's 13. Both kids are good kids at heart, but they've been through a lot with their parents' messy divorce and their father's subsequent move to Oregon. Claire received some child support initially, but her ex-husband lost his job about 18 months ago, and the payments became sporadic before stopping altogether. Despite our different circumstances, I've always tried to maintain a close relationship with Claire and her children. Emma adores her cousins, and they've been like siblings growing up. We have family dinners at my house every other Sunday, and Claire often drops by during the week, especially when she's between substitute teaching jobs. I've helped her with rent money more times than I can count, and I've never asked for repayment because family is family. Looking back now, I can see warning signs that I completely missed at the time. About 6 months ago, Claire started asking detailed questions about Emma's medication. At first her questions seemed caring and aunt-like. She asked about side effects, whether Emma ever felt tired or dizzy, and how expensive the medication was. I appreciated what I thought was genuine concern for Emma's well-being. Then Claire began asking more specific questions about the medication itself. She wanted to know the exact name, the dosage, whether Emma ever had leftover pills, and how closely the doctor monitored her prescription refills. When I mentioned during one conversation that Emma's neurologist had recently increased her dosage, Claire seemed unusually interested in the details. She asked whether Emma had any leftover pills from the lower dose, and what we did with unused medication. I explained that we always returned unused medications to the pharmacy for proper disposal, and Claire nodded approvingly, saying that was very responsible. At the time, I thought she was just being conscientious about medication safety. I had no idea she was gathering information for her own purposes. Around the same time, I started noticing that Claire seemed more energetic and focused during our family gatherings. She'd always been somewhat scattered and anxious, but suddenly she appeared calmer and more centered. When I commented on how good she looked, she credited a new yoga class and some meditation apps she'd been using. I was happy for her and didn't think to question it further. The first real red flag appeared about 3 months ago during one of our Sunday dinners. Emma had just taken her evening medication when Claire casually mentioned that she'd been reading about Lamictal online. She said she'd learned that it was sometimes prescribed for bipolar disorder and anxiety, not just epilepsy. She wondered aloud whether it might help with her own anxiety and mood swings. I suggested that she talk to her doctor about her anxiety symptoms, and that there were many effective medications available for mood disorders. Claire agreed, but then made an offhand comment that stuck with me. She said it would be interesting to know how Lamictal felt, whether it really made such a difference in mood stability. The way she said it made me slightly uncomfortable, but I dismissed the feeling as overthinking. A few weeks later, Emma mentioned something that should have been a major warning sign. She said her evening pills had been tasting different lately, almost chalky, and wondered if the pharmacy had switched to a generic brand. I called the pharmacy to check, but they confirmed they'd been dispensing the same brand name Lamictal for months. The pharmacist suggested that sometimes medications can taste different if they've been exposed to humidity or heat. I checked Emma's pill organizer, and noticed that a few of the pills did look slightly different, maybe a little more worn around the edges. I attributed this to the pills bouncing around in her backpack during school. Emma's seizures remained well controlled, so I didn't pursue the matter further. This was a mistake I would regret deeply. During this same period, I noticed that Emma seemed more tired than usual in the evenings. She was going to bed earlier, and occasionally complained of mild headaches. When I asked if she wanted to see Dr. Martinez for a checkup, she said she felt fine overall, just a little more tired with the school year ramping up. Her academic performance remained excellent, so I attributed her fatigue to the stress of junior year and college preparation. Meanwhile, Claire's demeanor continued to improve dramatically. She seemed happier, more stable, and was even talking about taking on more substitute teaching assignments. She'd gone from being financially stressed and emotionally volatile to appearing confident and optimistic. When I asked about her positive changes, she credited lifestyle modifications, better sleep, regular exercise, and mindfulness practices. The turning point came 3 weeks ago, during what should have been an ordinary family dinner. Claire had brought Tyler and Madison over as usual, and we were having tacos and catching up on everyone's week. Emma had just finished her homework and came downstairs to join us for dessert. As always, she took her evening medication right on schedule at 7:30. After dinner, Claire asked if she could use my bathroom upstairs to touch up her makeup before heading home. I told her of course, and she went upstairs with her purse. Emma was loading the dishwasher, and Tyler and Madison were arguing about something on Madison's phone. It was a completely normal family evening. About 10 minutes later, Claire came back downstairs looking refreshed. She gathered her kids, thanked me for dinner, and they all headed out to her car. It wasn't until after they'd driven away that Emma realized she'd left her science textbook in my bedroom, where she'd been studying earlier. I went upstairs with Emma to help her find the book, and that's when I saw it. Claire's makeup compact was sitting on my dresser, apparently forgotten in her rush to gather her things and get the kids moving. It was a small gold compact that I'd seen her use dozens of times. Without thinking much about it, I picked it up to set it aside so I could return it to her the next day. The compact felt unusually heavy, and made a rattling sound when I lifted it. Curious, I opened it to make sure nothing was broken inside. What I found instead changed everything I thought I knew about my sister. Nestled beneath the mirror, where powder should have been, were approximately 20 small, white shield-shaped tablets. I recognized them immediately, because I'd been seeing them twice daily for over 5 years. They were Emma's Lamictal pills, 200 milligram tablets, the exact medication that kept my daughter's epilepsy under control. My hands started shaking as I stared at the pills. There was no innocent explanation for why Claire would have Emma's medication hidden in her makeup compact. These weren't pills that had accidentally fallen into her purse. They were deliberately concealed, carefully positioned beneath the compact's mirror in a way that would hide them from casual observation. Emma was still looking for her textbook, completely unaware that I'd just discovered evidence of what could only be described as theft. Theft of her vital medication. Medication that she needed to prevent potentially life-threatening seizures. My mind raced through the implications. How long had this been going on? How many pills had Claire taken? Was this why Emma had been more tired lately? Was this why some of her pills looked different? I quickly closed the compact and slipped it into my pocket before Emma could see it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I needed to think clearly, but emotions were flooding through me. Anger, betrayal, fear for Emma's safety, and a sick realization that I'd been blind to what was happening right under my nose. Emma found her textbook, and we went back downstairs. I tried to act normal, helping her organize her school materials for the next day, and chatting about her upcoming chemistry test. But inside, I was reeling from the discovery. Every casual question Claire had asked about Emma's medication now took on a sinister meaning. Every time she'd complimented Emma on how well she was managing her condition, she'd been lying to my face while stealing the very medication that kept Emma healthy. After Emma went to bed, I sat in my kitchen staring at Claire's compact. I opened it again, hoping somehow I'd been mistaken, but the pills were definitely there. 20 tablets of 200 mg Lamictal, which at Emma's current dosage, represented 10 days' worth of medication. 10 days during which Emma had been taking something else, or nothing at all, while I remained completely unaware. I counted Emma's remaining pills in her organizer, and cross-referenced them with her prescription dates. The math was disturbing. She should have had more pills remaining than she actually did. Over the past 3 months, approximately 60 pills had gone missing. 60 pills that should have been protecting Emma from seizures had instead been stolen by my own sister. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Claire hadn't just stolen medication, she'd been putting Emma's life at risk. Every missing pill represented a moment when Emma was less protected from seizures. Every day that Claire had substituted something else for Emma's real medication was a day my daughter could have had a breakthrough seizure at school, while driving, or during any normal teenage activity. I thought about all the times Claire had volunteered to help Emma with her medication routine when I was running late from work. All the occasions when Claire had been alone in our house, while Emma was at school and I was at the dental office. All the family gatherings where Claire had access to Emma's backpack, her room, her medication supplies. How long had she been doing this? How had I missed it? But even as anger consumed me, another emotion was growing stronger, a cold, calculating determination to get to the bottom of this situation. I needed to understand exactly what Claire had been doing and why. I needed to know how this had affected Emma's health, and I needed to make sure it never happened again. I spent the rest of that night researching Lamictal abuse online. What I learned was deeply disturbing. While Lamictal isn't typically considered a drug of abuse like opioids or stimulants, it can have mood-stabilizing effects that some people find appealing. More commonly, people steal prescription medications to sell them, as many psychiatric medications have street value, especially when they're expensive brand-name drugs like Emma's Lamictal. A quick online search revealed that 200 mg Lamictal tablets can sell for anywhere from $5 to $15 each on the black market. If Claire had stolen 60 pills over 3 months, she could have made anywhere from $300 to $900. For someone struggling financially like Claire, this would represent significant income, especially if she viewed it as a victimless crime. But it wasn't victimless. Emma was the victim, and I'd failed to protect her. The next morning, I called Emma's school and told them she wouldn't be coming in due to a medical appointment. Then I called Dr. Martinez's office and explained that we needed an urgent appointment to discuss Emma's medication. The nurse heard the anxiety in my voice and managed to fit us in that afternoon. Emma was confused about missing school for a doctor's appointment, especially since she felt fine. I explained that I'd noticed some inconsistencies with her medication and wanted Dr. Martinez to evaluate her current dosage and effectiveness. It wasn't entirely untrue, but I wasn't ready to tell Emma what I'd discovered until I better understood the full situation. Dr. Martinez examined Emma thoroughly, checking her reflexes, coordination, and cognitive function. He asked detailed questions about her sleep, energy levels, mood, and any unusual symptoms she might have experienced recently. Emma mentioned being more tired lately and having occasional mild headaches, symptoms that now took on new significance, given what I knew about her stolen medication. When Dr. Martinez asked about medication compliance, Emma assured him she never missed doses and always took her pills at the same times each day. She had no idea that some of those pills hadn't been her real medication. The innocence in her voice, as she described her careful medication routine, broke my heart. After examining Emma, Dr. Martinez asked to speak with me privately. In his office, I explained what I'd discovered in Claire's makeup compact. His expression grew increasingly serious as I described the missing pills, the timeline, and Emma's recent symptoms.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Martinez was clearly alarmed. He explained that suddenly reducing Lamictal dosage, especially without medical supervision, could trigger breakthrough seizures or even withdrawal symptoms. The fact that Emma had been unknowingly taking a reduced dose for possibly months put her at significant risk. He immediately ordered blood work to check Emma's current Lamictal levels and scheduled an EEG to assess her brain activity. Most importantly, Dr. Martinez made it clear that what Claire had done wasn't just theft, it was a form of medical endangerment. By stealing Emma's medication, she'd compromised Emma's seizure control and put her health at serious risk. He strongly recommended that I report the theft to both the police and the medical board, as medication theft involving a minor with a serious medical condition was a criminal matter. As we left Dr. Martinez's office, Emma could tell something was seriously wrong. She'd never seen me look so shaken, and the urgency of the appointment combined with the blood work and additional testing had clearly worried her. I promised to explain everything once we got the test results back, but assured her that she wasn't in any medical danger now that we were addressing the situation. That evening, I knew I had to confront Claire before taking any formal action. I needed to hear her explanation, however inadequate it might be. I also needed to understand the full scope of what she'd been doing. Had she been selling Emma's medication, using it herself? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, did she have any comprehension of the danger she'd put Emma in? I called Claire and asked her to come over after dinner, saying I'd found something of hers and wanted to return it. She agreed readily, seeming completely unsuspicious. Her casual tone made me even angrier. How could she be so nonchalant when she'd been systematically stealing medication from her own niece? While waiting for Claire to arrive, I prepared myself for what would likely be one of the most difficult conversations of my life. I placed her makeup compact on my kitchen table, the evidence of her betrayal sitting there like an accusation. I also printed out information about Lamictal, its importance in seizure control, and the potential consequences of medication non-compliance. When Claire knocked on my door that evening, she seemed relaxed and happy. She hugged me warmly and asked how Emma was doing. The normalcy of her behavior felt almost surreal given what I now knew about her actions. She was acting like the caring aunt she'd always appeared to be, while having spent months endangering her niece's health. I invited Claire to sit at the kitchen table and placed her compact in front of her. For a moment she looked confused, probably wondering why I was making such a formal presentation of returning her forgotten makeup. Then I opened the compact, revealing the hidden pills, and watched as the color drained from her face. The conversation that followed would change our family forever. Claire stared at the open compact for what felt like an eternity, her mouth opening and closing without any words coming out. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations and shattered trust. Finally she looked up at me with eyes that had gone from confused to panic to something that looked almost like relief. "Rachel, I can explain," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her hands were shaking as she reached toward the compact, then pulled back as if the pills might burn her fingers. "I'm listening," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream at her, to demand how she could have endangered Emma like this, but I knew I needed to hear her explanation before I completely lost control. Claire took a shaky breath and ran her hands through her hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen countless times since we were children. It started about 4 months ago, she began, not meeting my eyes. Tyler needed new school clothes, and Madison's glasses broke, and I just didn't have the money. The child support had stopped coming, and I was barely getting any substitute teaching work. I waited, my jaw clenched so tightly it was starting to ache. This was about money, just as I'd suspected. I was desperate, Rachel, I mean really desperate. The electricity was about to be shut off, and the kids were asking me why we couldn't afford things that all their friends had. I felt like such a failure as a mother. Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. Not yet. So you decided to steal from Emma? I asked, my voice ice cold. No, it wasn't like that initially. I was Googling ways to make extra money, and I came across this forum where people talked about selling unused medications. I started thinking about all the prescription bottles in people's medicine cabinets that just sit there, unused and wasted. My stomach churned as I realized where this was heading. I remembered you mentioning that Emma's dosage had been increased, and I wondered if you had any leftover pills from her old prescription. I was going to ask you directly, but then I thought about how expensive Lamictal is, and I researched its street value. The calculated nature of her planning made this so much worse than an impulsive mistake. This wasn't desperation leading to a moment of poor judgment. This was premeditated theft from her own niece. How did you get the pills, Claire? I demanded. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara. The first time was when you asked me to watch Emma after her dental appointment 3 months ago. You were running late from work, and Emma was napping off the anesthesia. I saw her pill organizer on the kitchen counter, and I took 2 pills from different days. I told myself it was just once, just enough to pay the electric bill. I remembered that day clearly. Emma had gotten her wisdom teeth removed, and I'd asked Claire to stay with her until I could leave work early. I'd trusted my sister completely with my daughter's care, never imagining she was using the opportunity to steal Emma's medication. But it wasn't just once, was it? I said, gesturing toward the compact full of pills. Claire shook her head miserably. After that first time, I kept telling myself I would stop. But the money helped so much, and Emma seemed fine, so I convinced myself it wasn't really hurting anyone. I started replacing some of her pills with over-the-counter vitamins that looked similar. My blood ran cold. You gave my daughter vitamins instead of her seizure medication. Just sometimes, and not very many. I researched it online, and lots of people said that missing a few doses here and there wasn't dangerous for someone whose seizures were well controlled. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. You researched medical advice online about my daughter's epilepsy medication. Claire, you could have killed her. Do you understand that? Missing doses can trigger breakthrough seizures. She could have had a seizure while driving, or at school, or anywhere. But she didn't. Claire said desperately. She's been fine this whole time. Her seizures are still controlled. By pure luck, I shot back. And what about the fatigue she's been experiencing? The headaches? Those were withdrawal symptoms from having her medication reduced without medical supervision. Claire looked genuinely shocked. I didn't know she was having symptoms. She seemed perfectly normal to me. Because you weren't looking for symptoms. You were too busy calculating how much money you could make from stealing her pills. I started pacing around the kitchen, trying to burn off some of the angry energy coursing through me. How much, Claire? How much money did you make from selling Emma's medication? She was silent for a long moment, staring down at her hands. About $800 over the past 3 months, she finally admitted. $800. My daughter's health and safety had been compromised for $800. I felt sick. Who did you sell them to? I asked. There's this guy Derek, who Tyler knows from school, his older brother. He told me he knew people who bought prescription medications, no questions asked. I would meet him in the parking lot of the grocery store on Maple Street. The image of my sister conducting drug deals in grocery store parking lots was almost too surreal to process. This was Claire, who used to volunteer at church bake sales and helped elderly neighbors with their yard work. How had desperation transformed her into someone capable of stealing medication from her own niece? Does Tyler know what you were doing? I asked, suddenly worried about what her children might have witnessed. God, no, Claire said quickly. I told him I was selling some of my old jewelry and clothes online. He has no idea about any of this. At least there was that small mercy. Tyler and Madison didn't need to know their mother had been dealing drugs to make ends meet. Claire, what you did isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal. You stole controlled medication from a minor, you endangered Emma's health, you sold prescription drugs. Do you understand the legal implications of what you've done? She looked up at me with genuine fear in her eyes. Legal implications? Rachel, you're not going to call the police, are you? Please think about Tyler and Madison. If I get arrested, what happens to them? You should have thought about your children before you decided to steal medication from your niece, I replied harshly. But honestly, Claire, calling the police is the least of your concerns right now. Her face went even paler. What do you mean? I took Emma to see Dr. Martinez today. He ran blood tests to check her current medication levels, and he's scheduling additional tests to make sure your little experiment didn't cause any lasting damage. If those tests show that Emma's health was compromised by your actions, this becomes medical endangerment of a minor. That's a felony, Claire. Claire started crying harder, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Rachel, please, I know what I did was wrong, but I was so desperate. You don't know what it's like to have your children look at you like you're failing them every single day. Actually, I do know exactly what that's like, I said coldly. I've been a single mother for 7 years, and I've struggled financially plenty of times. But I never once considered stealing medication from a sick child to solve my problems. I'll pay it all back, Claire said desperately. Every penny. I'll get a full-time job. I'll sell my car if I have to. Please don't report this to the police. Pay what back, Claire? The $800 you made. How do you pay back the trust you've destroyed? How do you compensate for the nights I'm going to lie awake wondering if Emma's going to have a seizure because her medication levels have been destabilized? How do you repay the psychological damage of knowing that someone she trusted was putting her life at risk? Claire didn't have an answer for that, and we sat in silence for several minutes. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, marking time that felt suspended between the life we'd had as a family and whatever came next. I need you to tell me exactly which pills you took and when, I finally said. Dr. Martinez needs a complete timeline to properly assess Emma's care going forward. Over the next hour, Claire walked me through her systematic theft of Emma's medication. It was worse than I'd initially realized. She'd been taking pills regularly for over 3 months, sometimes as many as 4 or 5 pills per week. She'd developed an elaborate system of replacing Emma's medication with similarly shaped vitamins and over-the-counter supplements, carefully timing her thefts for days when she knew I would be distracted or running late. The level of planning involved was staggering. Claire had researched Emma's medication schedule, identified which days I was most likely to be in a hurry, and even figured out which vitamins most closely resembled Lamictal pills in size and color. She'd been carrying out this deception for months while maintaining the facade of a caring, concerned aunt. The pills in the compact, I said, pointing to the evidence sitting between us. Were you planning to sell those too? Claire nodded miserably. I was supposed to meet Derek tomorrow afternoon. Those were going to pay for Madison's school field trip and some groceries. The casual way she mentioned using stolen medication money for normal family expenses made my skin crawl. She'd been funding her children's activities and daily needs by endangering Emma's health, and she'd somehow convinced herself this was acceptable. Claire, I want you to understand something very clearly, I said, leaning forward across the table. What you did to Emma wasn't just a crime against her. It was a betrayal of everything our family stands for. You took advantage of my trust, endangered my daughter's life, and you did it all while looking me in the eye and pretending to care about her well-being. I do care about Emma, Claire protested. I love her like she's my own daughter. No, you don't, I replied firmly. People who love someone don't steal their vital medication. People who love someone don't put their health at risk for money. What you feel for Emma might be affection, but it's not love. Love protects, love sacrifices, love puts the other person's needs first. What you did was the opposite of love. Claire's crying intensified, but I felt no urge to comfort her. She'd made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. I'm going to give you one chance to do the right thing, I continued. Tomorrow morning you're going to call Dr. Martinez's office and provide them with a complete written timeline of every pill you stole, when you took it, and what you replaced it with. You're going to cooperate fully with Emma's medical care going forward. Okay, Claire whispered. I can do that. I'm not finished. You're also going to contact this Derek person and tell him you're no longer selling medications. You're going to return any money you still have from previous sales. And you're going to provide me with his contact information so I can make sure this drug dealing operation is shut down completely. Claire's eyes widened. Rachel, I can't give you Derek's information. These aren't the kind of people you want to mess with. Then you should have thought about that before you got involved with them, I replied, unsympathetically. Emma's safety is my priority, not protecting your drug dealer contacts. What about Tyler and Madison? Claire asked desperately. If something happens to me, what happens to them? It was a fair question, and despite my anger, I did care about my nephew and niece. They were innocent victims in this situation, just like Emma. That depends entirely on your cooperation and willingness to take responsibility for your actions, I said. If you do everything I've outlined, and if Emma's medical tests come back showing no lasting damage, then maybe we can figure out a way to handle this within the family. Hope flickered in Claire's eyes. You mean you won't call the police? I haven't decided yet. That depends on a lot of factors, including Emma's test results and your level of cooperation. But Claire, understand this, your relationship with Emma is over. You will never again be alone with her. You will never again have access to her medication or her medical information. The trust you've broken can't be repaired. Claire nodded frantically. I understand whatever you think is best. And if I ever discover that you've stolen medication from anyone else, or if you ever put Emma at risk again in any way, I will not hesitate to involve law enforcement. Do you understand me? Yes, she whispered. I understand. I picked up her makeup compact and dumped the stolen pills into a small plastic bag. I'm keeping these as evidence. Dr. Martinez needs to see exactly what you took. Claire watched the pills disappear into the bag, her last source of quick money gone. She looked defeated and scared, which was exactly how she should feel. I need you to leave now, I said, standing up from the table. Emma doesn't know about any of this yet, and I need time to figure out how to tell her that her aunt has been stealing her medication. Rachel, please don't tell her it was me, Claire begged. She loves me so much and this will destroy her. You should have considered Emma's feelings before you decided to endanger her health, I replied coldly. She deserves to know the truth about what happened to her medication, and she deserves to understand why she's been feeling tired and having headaches. Claire gathered her things slowly, as if delaying the inevitable. At the door she turned back one more time. For what it's worth, I am truly sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I never intended for Emma to get hurt. Intent doesn't matter when a child's health is at stake, I replied. Results matter. Choices matter, and your choices put Emma at risk every single day for months. After Claire left, I sat alone in my kitchen staring at the bag of stolen pills. The house felt different somehow, as if the revelation of Claire's betrayal had changed the very atmosphere of our home. This had been a place where family gathered safely, where Emma's medical needs were carefully managed, where trust and love were supposed to be paramount. Now it felt violated. I called Dr. Martinez's after-hours line and left a detailed message about my conversation with Claire. I explained that I now had a complete timeline of the medication theft and that Claire would be calling his office in the morning to provide a written account. I also mentioned my concerns about Emma's recent symptoms and asked whether we needed to adjust her medication regimen to account for the periods when her dosage had been effectively reduced. Then I did something I'd never had to do before. I began researching how to secure Emma's medication from family members. I looked up lockable medication containers, considered whether I needed to move her pills to a safe, and researched whether there were ways to make prescription bottles tamper-evident. The fact that I had to take these precautions because of my own sister was heartbreaking. Emma's medication routine had always been simple and trusting. She kept her pills in a weekly organizer on her nightstand, and I kept her monthly supply in the original bottles in our kitchen cabinet. It had never occurred to me that I needed to protect her medication from family members. Now I was ordering a lockable medication box online and planning to keep Emma's pills secured in my bedroom where I could monitor access. I was researching apps that would track medication compliance and considering asking Dr. Martinez for more frequent prescription refills so we'd notice missing pills sooner. As I went through this process, my anger toward Claire deepened. It wasn't just that she'd stolen medication or endangered Emma's health. She'd stolen our sense of safety and trust within our own family. She'd forced me to view every family gathering, every casual visit, every moment when she'd been alone with Emma as a potential opportunity for theft and deception. I spent most of that night awake, replaying every interaction I'd had with Claire over the past few months. Every compliment she'd given Emma about managing her condition so well. Every time she'd volunteered to help with Emma's care when I was running late. Every casual question about Emma's medication and doctor visits. All of it had been a lie, designed to facilitate her theft and cover her tracks. The next morning, Emma could tell immediately that something was seriously wrong. I'd barely slept, my eyes were red from crying, and I was moving around the kitchen with a nervous energy that was impossible to hide. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, as I made her breakfast with shaking hands. "You look terrible. Did something happen?" I'd spent hours trying to figure out how to explain this situation to Emma in a way that wouldn't traumatize her or destroy her relationship with her cousins. But every approach I considered felt inadequate. How do you tell your daughter that someone she loves and trusts has been stealing her life-saving medication? "Emma, we need to talk about something serious," I said, sitting down across from her at the breakfast table. "It's about your medication." Her face immediately grew concerned. "Is something wrong with my pills? Are they not working anymore?" "The medication itself is fine," I assured her. "But I discovered yesterday that some of your pills have been missing." Emma looked confused. "Missing? What do you mean missing?" I took a deep breath and chose my words carefully. "Someone has been taking pills from your supply and replacing them with vitamins." The color drained from Emma's face. "Someone stole my medication. Who would do that? Why would anyone steal seizure medication? Some prescription medications have value on the black market," I explained gently. "People buy them illegally and either use them or resell them." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "Mom, who had access to my pills? Who could have taken them?" This was the question I'd been dreading. I could see Emma's mind working through the possibilities, considering everyone who'd been in our house, everyone who'd helped with her care, everyone she trusted with knowledge about her medical routine. "Emma, this is going to be very difficult to hear," I said softly. It was Aunt Claire. The expression that crossed Emma's face was one I never wanted to see again. It was the look of complete betrayal, of innocence being shattered, of trust being destroyed. She stared at me in silence for what felt like forever, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Aunt Claire stole my medication," she finally whispered. I nodded, feeling tears start to form in my own eyes as I watched my daughter's world shift. "But why? I don't understand why she would do that. She loves me, she's always telling me how proud she is of how I manage my epilepsy." Emma's voice trailed off as she began to grasp the full implications. "She needed money," I explained simply. "And she discovered that your medication could be sold for a significant amount." Emma sat in stunned silence, her breakfast untouched. I could practically see her replaying every recent interaction with Claire, every moment of trust and affection, every time Claire had complimented her or helped with her care. "Mom, does this mean I've been having seizure symptoms because my medication levels were wrong?" Emma asked, her voice small and scared. "Dr. Martinez thinks that might explain the fatigue and headaches you've been experiencing." I confirmed, "We're going to monitor you very carefully going forward, and he may need to adjust your dosage to make sure you're properly protected." "How long was this going on?" "About 3 months based on what Claire told me." Emma put her head in her hands, and I could see her shoulders starting to shake. 3 months. For 3 months I thought I was taking my real medication, but some of the time I was just taking vitamins. I reached across the table and took her hands in mine. "Emma, I am so incredibly sorry. I should have noticed. I should have protected you better." She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "It's not your fault, Mom. You trusted her. We both trusted her. I can't believe Aunt Claire would do this to me." The pain in Emma's voice was unbearable. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. Watching my daughter's faith in family, in love, in basic human decency, being destroyed by someone she'd adored and trusted completely. The weeks following my confrontation with Claire felt like navigating through a minefield where every family tradition, every shared memory, had to be re-examined through the lens of her betrayal. Emma's test results came back, showing dangerously low Lamictal levels, confirming that her recent symptoms had indeed been caused by the medication theft. Dr. Martinez was so concerned about the potential for breakthrough seizures that he immediately put Emma on a modified dosage schedule and ordered weekly monitoring for the next month. I found myself watching Emma constantly, terrified that any moment of fatigue or slight headache might signal an impending seizure. The security I'd built around Emma's medical care over 5 years had been completely shattered. Every pill organizer refill, every dose time, every medical decision now carried the weight of knowing how easily our safeguards had been breached. Emma was struggling too, but in ways I hadn't anticipated. Beyond the natural hurt and anger over Claire's betrayal, she was dealing with a profound sense of vulnerability that she'd never experienced before. She'd always taken pride in managing her epilepsy independently, seeing herself as responsible and capable, despite her medical condition. Learning that someone had been tampering with her medication without her knowledge had shaken her confidence in her own body and her ability to stay safe. "Mom, what if this happens again?" she asked one evening, as I administered her pills from the new locked medication box. "What if there are other times when I think I'm taking my real medication, but I'm not? How would I even know?" These were questions I couldn't fully answer, and they kept me awake at night too. The trust that forms the foundation of medical care had been violated in the most personal way possible. Emma had to believe that the pills she took twice daily would protect her from seizures, but now that faith had been damaged by someone we'd both loved and trusted. 3 days after my confrontation with Claire, I received a call that changed everything. It was Detective Sarah Morrison from the Riverside Police Department's Pharmaceutical Crimes Unit. She explained that they'd been investigating illegal prescription drug sales in our area and had identified Claire as part of a larger operation. "Henderson, we understand this is a family matter, but we need you to know that your sister was selling controlled substances to a known drug dealer who's been on our radar for months. When we arrested him yesterday, he provided us with a list of his suppliers in exchange for a reduced sentence. Your sister's name was on that list." My heart sank as I realized the situation had spiraled far beyond my control. I'd been hoping to handle Claire's actions within the family, partly to protect Tyler and Madison from the trauma of seeing their mother arrested, but that option had just evaporated. "Detective Morrison, what happens now?" I asked, dreading the answer. "We'll need you and your daughter to provide formal statements about the medication theft. We also need the pills you recovered, and any documentation from your daughter's doctor about her compromised care. Your sister will be arrested on charges of prescription drug theft, endangering a minor, and distribution of controlled substances." The weight of it all hit me at once. Claire wasn't just going to face family consequences or civil penalties. She was going to be charged with serious crimes that could result in years in prison. Tyler and Madison were going to watch their mother be arrested, and they'd probably end up in foster care, since their father lived across the country and had been largely absent from their lives. That evening, I had to break the news to Emma that the police were involved and that we'd both need to provide statements. She took it better than I expected, perhaps because she'd already been processing the magnitude of Claire's betrayal. "Is Aunt Claire going to jail?" Emma asked quietly. "I don't know yet," I replied honestly. "But what she did was illegal, and there are consequences for breaking the law, especially when it endangers someone's health." "What about Tyler and Madison? This isn't their fault." Emma's compassion, even in the midst of her own trauma, reminded me of why I was so proud of the young woman she'd become. She was thinking about her cousin's well-being, despite being the victim of their mother's crimes. "I don't know what will happen to them either," I admitted, "but we'll figure out a way to help them through this." The next morning, Detective Morrison called to inform me that Claire had been arrested at her home. Tyler and Madison had been present during the arrest, and emergency social services had been contacted to arrange temporary placement. My heart broke thinking about what those kids were going through, watching their mother taken away in handcuffs, while social workers discussed their immediate future. I immediately called the social services office and offered to take temporary custody of Tyler and Madison. They were family, and despite what their mother had done, they deserved stability and love during this crisis. The caseworker, Mrs. Peterson, explained that they'd need to conduct background checks and home evaluations, but she was relieved to know the children had family willing to care for them. Within hours of Claire's arrest, Tyler called me from a foster home, where he and Madison had been placed temporarily. His voice was shaky and confused, and I could hear Madison crying in the background. "Aunt Rachel, they won't tell us what's happening. They just said Mom broke some laws and has to stay in jail. What did she do? Can we come stay with you?" Explaining Claire's crimes to her children was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had. Tyler was 15, old enough to understand the basics, but Madison was only 13, and still saw her mother as her primary source of security and love. I tried to be honest while being age-appropriate, explaining that their mother had made some very bad choices that hurt people and broke laws. "She stole medicine from Emma?" Tyler asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "But Emma needs her medicine for seizures. Why would Mom do that? Your mother was struggling financially and made desperate choices." I explained gently, "That doesn't excuse what she did, but it helps explain why it happened." The custody process moved quickly, partly because Tyler and Madison both asked to stay with us, and partly because there were no other family members available to care for them. Their father had been contacted in Oregon, but he'd made it clear that he wasn't in a position to take custody of his children, either financially or emotionally. 5 days after Claire's arrest, Tyler and Madison moved into our house with the few belongings they'd been allowed to take from their home, before it was searched by police. Our quiet 3-bedroom house suddenly felt very full, but Emma immediately stepped up to help her cousins adjust to their new reality. The first few weeks were challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. Tyler was angry about the situation and embarrassed about his mother's crimes. He'd been popular at school, and news of Claire's arrest had spread quickly through the teenage gossip network. He was dealing with friends, asking intrusive questions, and teachers treating him with a mixture of sympathy and suspicion. Madison was handling the trauma differently. She'd become withdrawn and clingy, afraid to let me out of her sight for fear that I might disappear too. She'd wake up crying from nightmares about her mother and asking repeatedly when they could visit her in jail. Emma showed remarkable maturity during this period, helping her cousins with homework, sharing her room with Madison, and providing emotional support when they needed it most. She never once complained about the upheaval in our household, or resented Tyler and Madison for their mother's actions. If anything, she seemed to understand that they were all victims of Claire's choices. The legal proceedings moved forward steadily. Claire's lawyer contacted me to discuss a possible plea agreement, hoping that cooperation from our family might result in reduced charges. I agreed to meet with him, not out of any desire to help Claire avoid consequences, but because I wanted to understand how the legal process might affect Tyler and Madison. Attorney Michael Thompson explained that Claire was facing multiple felony charges that could result in up to 8 years in prison if she went to trial and was convicted on all counts. However, if she pled guilty and cooperated fully with the investigation into the drug dealing network, she might receive a sentence of 2 to 4 years with the possibility of early parole for good behavior. "Mrs. Henderson, your sister is genuinely remorseful about what she did to your daughter," Thompson said during our meeting. "She's asked me to convey her willingness to do whatever she can to make this right, including paying for any additional medical care Emma might need." I appreciated the gesture, but money couldn't repair the damage Claire had done to our family's sense of safety and trust. Emma was still having nightmares about seizures, still checking her medication multiple times each day to make sure the pills looked correct, still jumping at unexpected sounds because her nervous system remained on high alert. "Thompson, what happens to Tyler and Madison during their mother's incarceration?" I asked. "That depends on several factors, including the length of her sentence and whether family members are willing to provide long-term care. If you're prepared to maintain custody of the children, the court would likely approve a guardianship arrangement." Over the following months, Tyler and Madison slowly began to heal from the trauma of their mother's arrest and the dissolution of their family unit. Tyler started seeing a therapist who specialized in adolescent trauma, and his anger gradually transformed into sadness and then acceptance. Madison's nightmares became less frequent, and she started sleeping through the night again. The The three teenagers developed a different kind of bond, united by their shared experience of having their world turned upside down by an adult's poor choices. They became protective of each other in ways that went beyond typical cousin relationships, understanding that they were all survivors of the same family crisis. Emma's recovery was more complex. The physical effects of the medication tampering resolved relatively quickly once her Lamictal levels were properly restored, but the psychological impact lingered. She developed a hypervigilance about her medical care that was both protective and exhausting. She researched every aspect of her condition, memorized the appearance of every pill, and created backup systems for tracking her medication compliance. Dr. Martinez referred Emma to a psychologist who specialized in medical trauma, and these sessions helped her process not just Claire's betrayal, but her own feelings of vulnerability as someone living with a chronic condition. The therapy helped her understand that being vigilant about her health was appropriate and necessary, but that she didn't need to carry the burden of constant fear about other people's potential deception. 6 months after Claire's arrest, she pled guilty to all charges and received a sentence of 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. The plea hearing was emotionally devastating for everyone involved. Tyler and Madison sat in the courtroom watching their mother accept responsibility for crimes they still didn't fully understand, while Emma and I sat nearby representing the victims of those crimes. Claire looked directly at Emma during her statement to the court, tears streaming down her face as she apologized for endangering her niece's health and violating the trust of her family. Emma listened with composure beyond her years, but I could see her hands shaking as she absorbed her aunt's words. After the hearing, Claire was allowed a brief supervised visit with her children before being transferred to the state correctional facility. I stayed in the room during their conversation, partly for security reasons and partly because Tyler and Madison had asked me to be there for support. "I know I've destroyed our family," Claire told her children, holding their hands through her shackles. "I know I've hurt Emma and Aunt Rachel, and I know I've failed you both as a mother, but I want you to know that every choice I made was because I was trying to take care of you, even though I went about it in completely the wrong way." Tyler looked at his mother with a mixture of love and disappointment that was heartbreaking to witness. "Mom, we would rather have been poor than have you steal medicine from Emma. We would rather have worn old clothes and eaten cheap food than know you were hurting our family." Madison was less articulate in her response, simply clinging to her mother and crying. At 13, she couldn't fully process the complexity of love and betrayal, accountability and forgiveness, that defined their situation. As we left the courthouse that day, I felt a strange sense of closure mixed with sadness. Justice had been served in the legal sense, but the emotional work of healing our family was far from complete. The year that followed brought unexpected growth and resilience. Emma flourished academically, channeling her experience into a passion for advocacy and patient rights. She started a support group at her school for students dealing with chronic medical conditions and began volunteering with organizations that helped families navigate complex healthcare systems. Tyler and Madison gradually adapted to living in our household permanently. We legally formalized the guardianship arrangement, and they began to think of our house as home rather than a temporary refuge. Tyler's grades improved dramatically once he was removed from the financial stress and instability that had characterized his life with Claire, and Madison rediscovered her love of art and music. The three teenagers developed their own traditions and inside jokes, creating new family bonds that weren't defined by Claire's mistakes. They supported each other through difficult moments and celebrated each other's achievements in ways that demonstrated remarkable emotional maturity. 18 months after her sentencing, Claire became eligible for parole. She'd completed addiction counseling, participated in job training programs, and maintained perfect behavior throughout her incarceration. Her parole hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in March, and she'd asked if we would attend to provide character references. Emma, Tyler, Madison, and I spent hours discussing whether to support Claire's parole application. The decision was complicated by competing feelings of justice, mercy, family loyalty, and self-protection. Ultimately, we decided that Claire had served an appropriate amount of time for her crimes, and that keeping her in prison longer wouldn't repair the damage she'd caused or provide additional benefit to anyone involved. We attended the parole hearing as a family, presenting a united front in support of Claire's release, while also making clear that our relationships with her would need to be rebuilt gradually and with strict boundaries in place. Emma spoke eloquently about forgiveness being different from trust, and about how Claire's release was an opportunity for her to prove that she'd learned from her mistakes and changed her priorities. Claire was granted parole with conditions including continued counseling, community service, and supervised contact with minors. She'd lost her teaching credentials due to her felony convictions, but she'd completed training as a medical billing specialist while in prison and had a job waiting for her at a healthcare administration company. The day Claire was released, she came to our house for a carefully planned meeting. She looked older and more serious than she had before her incarceration, and she carried herself with a humility that hadn't been present in her previous interactions with our family. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, looking directly at Emma. "I don't expect trust. I don't expect our relationships to go back to how they were before. But I want you all to know that every day in prison, I thought about the choice I could have made differently. Every day I wished I could take back what I did to you, Emma. Every day I promised myself that if I got the chance to be part of this family again, I would prove that I'm different now." Emma listened carefully, then responded with words that showed how much she'd grown through this ordeal. "Aunt Claire, I've learned that forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once. It's something you choose to work on every day. I'm willing to work on forgiving you, but you need to understand that things will never be exactly the same between us." "I understand," Claire replied. "I'm grateful for the chance to even try." As I watched my daughter speak with such wisdom and compassion to the person who had betrayed her trust so profoundly, I felt proud of the young woman she'd become through adversity. She'd learned lessons about resilience, boundaries, and the complexity of human relationships that most people never fully grasp. Our family had been shattered by Claire's choices, but we'd rebuilt ourselves into something stronger and more intentional. We'd learned that love without accountability isn't actually love, that trust must be earned through consistent actions, rather than words, and that healing is possible even after the most painful betrayals. The scars from Claire's medication theft would always be part of our story, but they no longer defined us. We'd survived the crisis, protected Emma's health, provided stability for Tyler and Madison, and created space for the possibility of redemption, without sacrificing our safety or self-respect.
Sometimes the people who hurt us most also teach us the most about our own strength, our capacity for growth, and the difference between forgiveness and foolishness. Claire's betrayal had been devastating, but our response to it had revealed reserves of courage, compassion, and wisdom we hadn't known we possessed. 2 years after Claire's release from prison, our family had settled into a new rhythm that none of us could have imagined during those dark early days. The wounds from her betrayal had healed into scars that served as reminders rather than sources of constant pain. Emma was thriving in her senior year of high school, having been accepted early admission to UC San Diego, where she planned to study public health with a focus on patient advocacy. The transformation in Emma over these years had been remarkable to witness. What began as a traumatic violation of her trust had evolved into a passion for protecting other vulnerable patients. She'd started a nonprofit organization called MedWatch that helped families of children with chronic conditions learn how to safeguard their medications and recognize signs of tampering or theft. Her story had been featured in several medical journals and patient advocacy publications, turning her painful experience into a tool for protecting others. Tyler, now 17, had become the steady, responsible young man I'd always believed he could be when freed from the chaos of his mother's financial desperation. He'd maintained a 4.2 GPA throughout high school while working part-time at a local pharmacy, a job he'd chosen specifically to understand medication management and security. His plan was to study pharmacology in college, inspired partly by what had happened to Emma, and partly by his desire to prevent others from exploiting the prescription drug system. Madison, at 15, had channeled her artistic talents into therapy and advocacy work. She volunteered at a women's shelter, teaching art classes to children whose mothers were recovering from various traumas. Her drawings and paintings often depicted themes of healing and resilience, reflecting her own journey from victim to survivor to helper. She'd recently won a statewide art competition with a piece titled Broken Trust, Rebuilt Stronger, which showed a shattered pill bottle being reconstructed with golden threads. Claire had been out of prison for 6 months now, and our relationship remained cautious but gradually improving. She lived in a small apartment across town and worked full-time at the medical billing company that had hired her during her incarceration. She attended weekly therapy sessions and had joined a support group for formerly incarcerated parents trying to rebuild relationships with their children. The conditions of our renewed relationship were clear and non-negotiable. Claire was never alone with any of us, especially Emma. All visits occurred in public places or in our home with multiple family members present. She had no access to any medications, medical information, or financial details about any of us. She understood that rebuilding trust would take years, not months, and that any violation of our boundaries would result in permanent estrangement. During her supervised visits with Tyler and Madison, Claire was a different person than she'd been before her arrest. Gone was the entitled, desperate woman who'd justified stealing from her sick niece to solve her financial problems. In her place was someone who listened more than she spoke, who acknowledged her children's feelings without trying to minimize them, and who consistently demonstrated through actions rather than words that she understood the magnitude of her past mistakes. The shift in Claire became most apparent during a family therapy session that all of us attended 6 months after her release. The therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, had been working with Tyler and Madison throughout their mother's incarceration and had suggested including Claire in a session to address unresolved family dynamics. "Claire, how do you understand the impact of your actions on your family?" Dr. Chen asked during that pivotal session. Claire took a long moment before responding, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I shattered my children's sense of safety and security. I violated Emma's trust and endangered her health. I forced Rachel to become a single parent to 4 teenagers instead of 1, and I destroyed relationships that had taken decades to build. But more than that, I taught my children that the people who are supposed to protect them might hurt them instead, and that's a lesson they'll carry for the rest of their lives." Tyler looked surprised by his mother's articulate understanding of her impact. Throughout his childhood, Claire had rarely taken full responsibility for anything, always finding ways to blame circumstances or other people for her problems. "Mom, do you understand why I can't just forgive you and go back to how things were?" Tyler asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Yes," Claire replied without hesitation, "because forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust has to be earned through consistent actions over time. I broke something precious, and even if it can be repaired, it will never be exactly the same as it was before." These words, so similar to what Emma had said to Claire upon her release, showed that Claire had genuinely absorbed the lessons from her family's pain rather than simply enduring her punishment and expecting everything to return to normal. Madison, who had been mostly silent during the session, finally spoke up. "Mom, I still love you, but I don't know how to trust you again. Every time you say something nice or do something thoughtful, part of me wonders what you really want or what you might be hiding." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't try to comfort Madison or minimize her feelings. "That's fair, sweetheart. I taught you to be suspicious of people who claim to love you, and now I have to live with the fact that you're suspicious of me. All I can do is keep showing up, keep being honest, and hope that someday you'll believe that I really have changed." Dr. Chen turned to Emma, who had been quietly observing the family dynamics. "Emma, as the primary victim of Claire's actions, how are you processing this family healing journey?" Emma chose her words carefully, demonstrating the maturity she'd developed through years of therapy and advocacy work. "I've learned that healing isn't linear, and it's not something that happens to you passively, it's something you choose to work on every day. I've also learned that protecting yourself from further harm is part of healing, not a barrier to it." She looked directly at Claire. "I don't hate you, and Claire, I understand that you were desperate and made terrible choices. But understanding why you did something doesn't mean I have to put myself at risk again. The boundaries we've set aren't punishments, they're protections." Claire nodded, her respect for Emma's wisdom evident in her expression. "I understand, and I'm grateful that you're even willing to have me in your life at all." The therapy session marked a turning point in our family's healing process. For the first time since Claire's arrest, we were all able to sit in the same room and have an honest conversation about the damage that had been done and the slow work of repair that lay ahead. In the months that followed, Claire continued to prove her commitment to change through consistent actions. She never missed a scheduled visit with Tyler and Madison, always arrived exactly on time, and respected every boundary we'd established without complaint or negotiation. She sent Emma a card on the anniversary of her medication theft, not asking for forgiveness but acknowledging the date and expressing her ongoing remorse. Most significantly, Claire began speaking at addiction recovery centers and support groups about prescription drug theft and family betrayal. She shared her story not to gain sympathy, but to help others understand the devastating impact that desperation can have on families and to encourage people to seek help before making irreversible mistakes. During one of these speaking engagements, which Tyler attended with her permission, Claire said something that finally helped him begin to forgive her. "I want to be clear about something," she told the audience of recovering addicts and their families. "I didn't steal my niece's medication because I was addicted to drugs. I stole it because I was addicted to taking shortcuts, to avoiding responsibility, to believing that my problems were more important than other people's well-being. That's a different kind of addiction, but it's just as destructive." Tyler later told me that hearing his mother take complete responsibility for her choices, without blaming her financial situation or desperation, had been the first step toward him believing she might actually have changed. Emma's 18th birthday became a milestone for our entire family. We celebrated not just her transition to adulthood, but her 5 years of successful epilepsy management and her transformation from victim to advocate. Dr. Martinez, who had been Emma's neurologist throughout the entire ordeal, attended the small party we held at our house. "Emma, when I first met you, you were a frightened 12-year-old girl who had just been diagnosed with epilepsy," he said during his impromptu toast. "Today you're a confident young woman who has turned her medical challenges into a mission to help others. You've shown incredible resilience, not just in managing your condition, but in overcoming betrayal and trauma to become a force for positive change." Emma's response to Dr. Martinez's praise showed how much she'd grown. "Thank you, Dr. Martinez, but I want to be clear that I didn't do this alone. My mom protected me when I couldn't protect myself. Tyler and Madison became my siblings when their family fell apart. And yes, even Aunt Claire's terrible choices taught me important lessons about boundaries, advocacy, and the difference between forgiveness and foolishness." She looked around the room at all of us. "I used to think that what happened to me was just a tragedy, something horrible that I had to survive. Now I understand that it was also an opportunity to discover strengths I didn't know I had, and to use my experience to help other people facing similar challenges." As Emma's graduation approached and she prepared to leave for college, Claire asked if she could write a letter of recommendation for Emma's scholarship applications. The request was surprising, given our strict boundaries around Claire's involvement in Emma's life, but Emma decided to allow it after careful consideration. The letter Claire wrote was remarkable in its honesty and humility. She described Emma's resilience in the face of family betrayal, her commitment to turning personal trauma into advocacy for others, and her mature understanding of forgiveness and boundaries. She also included a paragraph that brought tears to my eyes when Emma showed it to me. "Emma has every right to hate me for what I did to her," Claire wrote. "The fact that she has chosen to work toward forgiveness while maintaining appropriate self-protection demonstrates a wisdom and emotional intelligence that most adults never achieve. Any institution would be lucky to have a student who has faced adversity with such grace and used her experiences to benefit others." The letter helped Emma secure a full scholarship to UC San Diego, where she would study public health while continuing her advocacy work through MedWatch. The irony that Claire's recommendation had helped Emma achieve this success was not lost on any of us. On the night before Emma left for college, our entire family, including Claire, gathered for a farewell dinner. It was the first time in over 3 years that we'd all sat around the same table for a meal, and the significance of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. "I want to say something before Emma leaves," Claire said, standing up from her chair. 5 years ago I made choices that could have killed my niece and destroyed my family. I stole medication from a child who needed it to stay healthy, and I justified my actions by telling myself I was desperate and had no other options." She looked directly at each of us as she continued. "But sitting here tonight, seeing Tyler about to start his senior year with a 4.2 GPA, seeing Madison winning art competitions and helping other kids through her volunteer work, seeing Emma heading off to college with a full scholarship and a nonprofit organization she founded to help other patients. I understand something I didn't understand then." Claire paused, gathering her thoughts. "There are always other options. Always. I could have asked for help. I could have applied for assistance programs. I could have sold my belongings or moved to a smaller apartment. I chose the path that hurt other people because it seemed easier than admitting I needed help. That was selfishness, not desperation. Tyler spoke up, his voice steady. Mom, we would have helped you. If you'd explained what was happening with the money, with the bills, with everything, we could have figured it out together. I know that now, Claire replied, but at the time I was so ashamed of failing as a provider that I couldn't admit how bad things had gotten. I thought it was better to handle it myself, even if that meant making terrible choices, than to let you kids see me as weak or unsuccessful. Madison, now 15 and more articulate about her feelings, added her perspective. Mom, we already knew things were bad. We knew you were stressed about money and that Dad wasn't sending support. Pretending everything was fine didn't protect us from anything. It just made us feel like we couldn't trust you to tell us the truth. The conversation continued for over an hour, with each family member sharing their perspectives on what had happened, what they'd learned, and what they hoped for the future. It wasn't a magical moment of complete healing or total forgiveness, but it was real and honest in ways that our family interactions had never been before Claire's crime and incarceration. As Emma prepared to leave the next morning, she pulled me aside for a private conversation. Mom, I want you to know that I'm not afraid to leave you all here with Aunt Claire. I trust that you'll maintain the boundaries we've established, and I trust that she understands what will happen if she violates them. I was proud of Emma's clear thinking and protective instincts. What will you tell people at college about what happened? About your family situation? Emma considered the question thoughtfully. I'll tell the truth when it's appropriate and helpful. What happened to me wasn't shameful, it was criminal. And my response to it wasn't passive survival, it was active resistance and advocacy. I'm not going to hide my story, but I'm also not going to let it define me. As I watched Emma drive away to begin her college adventure, I felt a complex mixture of pride, sadness, and hope. She was leaving home as a confident young woman who understood her own strength, knew how to set boundaries, and was committed to using her experiences to help others. The trauma Claire had inflicted on our family had not broken Emma, it had revealed her resilience, and shaped her into someone who would make a meaningful difference in the world. Tyler and Madison continued to thrive in our household, which had become their permanent home through legal adoption proceedings completed just before Emma left for college. Claire supported the adoption, recognizing that stability and consistency were more important for her children than maintaining legal custody she was unprepared to exercise responsibly. The relationship between Claire and her children continued to evolve slowly. She attended Tyler's football games from the bleachers, not as a parent but as a supportive extended family member. She sent Madison art supplies for her birthday and attended her gallery showings at the community center. She respected the boundaries that had been established while consistently demonstrating her commitment to being a positive presence in their lives, rather than a source of drama or instability. Most importantly, Claire had learned to live with the consequences of her actions without expecting those consequences to disappear, simply because time had passed or because she'd changed her behavior. She understood that trust, once broken, might never be fully restored, and that forgiveness was not the same as forgetting or returning to previous relationship patterns. Our family's story became one of resilience, accountability, and the possibility of redemption without the expectation of complete restoration. We learned that love sometimes requires saying no, that protection can be an act of caring, and that healing is a choice we make every day, rather than a destination we reach once and then inhabit permanently. Emma calls from college every Sunday, updating us on her classes, her advocacy work, and her plans for the future. Tyler is applying to colleges with strong pharmacy programs, determined to understand medication systems well enough to prevent others from exploiting them. Madison continues creating art that reflects themes of brokenness and repair, beauty emerging from trauma, and the strength that comes from facing difficult truths. Claire continues her weekly therapy sessions, her community service at recovery centers, and her quiet, consistent efforts to prove that people can change when they take full responsibility for their actions and commit to doing the hard work of becoming better. She may never fully regain the trust she destroyed, but she has earned something equally valuable: the respect that comes from facing your mistakes honestly and dedicating your life to making sure they never happen again. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most teach us the most about our own capacity for strength, wisdom, and the kind of love that protects rather than enables. Our family was shattered by betrayal, but we rebuilt ourselves with intention, boundaries, and a deeper understanding of what it means to truly care for one another. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.